How do you start living the life you want when you don't have enough money? Um, there's this other guy on Twitter, Liad Chabot. He had a great tweet where he said, "Not wanting something is as good as having it." So, except for maybe one thing that you're working on at a time, I would suggest that for everything else, you should cultivate not wanting it. Indifference is actually the ultimate superpower. If you want to win a negotiation, you just have to care less than the other person. If you want the upper hand in a relationship, you just have to care less than the other person. Weirdly enough, it even works in business opportunities. The less you kind of genuinely want them, the more they're offered to you, assuming you have a certain level of skill set. Um, I'm not saying be apathetic, but I'm saying that you kind of have to be quantumous. You have to be good with the outcome either way. You still do your best job. You still put in the effort because that's who you are. But you don't get attached to the outcome. And this is wisdom that's as old as the hill. This goes back to the Bhagavad Gita. But yeah, I think detachment is good because detachment is necessary for peace, and peace is necessary for happiness. So even though we're taught and educated by society to be passionate and not detached, um, I think it's okay to be passionate about one thing at a time, but you can't be passionate about too many things, especially things you can't control. If you're passionate about things outside of your control, like politics, you're going to be miserable. Rene Girard. Girardian's theory on mimesis is one that Peter Thiel is famous for having mentioned. Um, Girard was a polymath who basically came up with this theory that most of our desires, it's basically a three-part theory. Part one is that most of our desires are mimetic, they're copied from other people. So we end up in competition with each other, fighting over a small set of things that are just copied from each other, and we aren't following our true, intrinsic, genuine desires. Uh, the second part of his theory is that people basically, because they're fighting over this stuff, the societies, the way that they settle these internal conflicts is by creating a scapegoat, and by essentially killing the scapegoat, they basically achieve harmony within their group again. And then the third part of his theory is that Christianity. This is where it takes a little bit of a turn. That Christianity is a very rare institution in that it defends against scapegoating and says the person who was scapegoated, in Christianity's case, Jesus, is actually the one who's correct. And I'm way oversimplifying it. I think it's worth reading Girard's mimetic theory and understanding it. You don't need to read all of his books. Some of them are very long and can be painful. But you can find summary papers. It's a model that's worth knowing about. I think the most important part of the model that's worth tracking is just that the part about mimesis, that our desires are copied from other people or socially copied, and I think that's an important one, and that feeds into Peter Thiel's whole concept of don't compete, because when you're competing with people, a lot of times really you're competing with them over things that you copied from them and desires you copied from them. And this is very common in business. Like you'll be running your company, and then a competitor shows up, and then you get obsessed with a competitor. And then you start basically chasing after the competitor, and you lose track of the fact that 99% of people out there are not your customers and don't even know what you're doing, and you should be going and getting more customers, not focusing on your competitor. And very often you will end up basically just both following the same strategy, jumping back and forth in front of each other, when the correct answer was to follow a completely different strategy. So I think that's the interesting practical takeaway from mimetic theory. And I think another piece that's important is don't scapegoat people.